me, what I believe makes our structure work so well is the locality of it. The the restriction where you start saying like we are only federalizing things that must be federal, and we're going to let decisions be made at the most local level that they can be when they can be. And the European government on the whole has been trending in the other direction. They've been increasing centralization rather than, and I think that
Well, of
we
course, there's
have
going to be an
also, and I
increase
think
in
we,
centralization because they didn't have a federal body before like we do, right?
yes, but if you look at like EU rules on basically anything like food, trade, on anything,
Hmm.
they're becoming highly intrusive, and there's increasing delegation, just like we in
Yeah,
similar to what
but
we
that's
have.
becoming more like the U.S., right? Like in the United States, Nebraska can't
It's becoming
negotiate its own trade deal with Poland, right? We have
okay.
to, yeah.
I'm not sure. I think it's almost an irrelevancy. Like
Okay,
let's call that a direction. Let's call that a direction,
sure.
and we can agree that EU and the Democratic left would like that direction. They're trending in that direction. That was the pitch. Was we're going to
Sure.
have a bigger, more
Uh,
expert, more expansive federal state that's going to fix these problems for you.
okay,
That's
okay,
been
sure. Let's. Okay, so I'm just curious on the Eric Adams thing in general. What? So on the left, what's like the equivalent left threat to you that's like comparable to that Eric Adams situation?
I don't think there's probably is an equivalency.
Okay.
Because like I think that the things that the right does that are really problematic today are the things that trend in the kind of like the autocratic direction where you start saying like we have a president who's not going to be restrained by norms and is just enforcing his wills and whims through the executive branch because he's just a we've elected a personality who doesn't care about norms, which means that you're going to get a lot of norms violations, which is terrible, oftentimes truly terrible.
Sure. And
The
maybe
thing
legal
the left
violations as well, right? Maybe, but
depends on what's happening. The thing the left does that is also problematic from my perspective is that they build structures within the government that then push for in these directions regardless of whether or not people want them to. And that was what made
yeah.
like the USAID stuff was not successful in terms of cutting the budget. It was not successful in terms of avoiding legal uh, rakes. They've been stepping on rakes left and right. It was successful in terms of raising awareness of how much stuff happens in the federal government that people really have no idea about. And that it's just very hard for the average person to square or to understand why we're doing. And I think people want accountability there. And they view accountability as being that the president you elect could do something about it.
Sure, but the
That doesn't
accountability
mean,
that people are talking about is all been fictitiously put in front of them by Elon and Trump. Like there already were Office of Inspector Generals, there already is the Office of Government Accountability. Like these things exist. Like a lot of the issues that they're bringing up now have already have been addressed in the past by like the
well, I mean,
OG
I think
or the Office of Inspector Generals, OGs.
you're probably going to end up seeing is that like money was allocated by Congress. I don't think Trump is going to win on impoundment. I think probably if he goes to the court, he's going to lose on that issue. I don't think you have a constitutional authority just to impound the money indefinitely. He might win on the Impoundment Act being technically wrong in some way or the other, but on the broader constitutional issue, I think he loses. But what you might start seeing is that, like, well, how specific was the delegation? Congress probably didn't delegate to this NGO or to this exact issue. They probably said something more along the lines of, we'd like to earmark $1 billion to fight AIDS in Africa,
Okay.
right? It's probably more general. So then what you're probably going to start seeing is Trump saying, okay, well, if you're going to force me to spend the money, then I'm going to give it to the most like right wing conservative NGO that promotes abstinence or whatever, whatever the fucking, whatever the own the lid tactic would be to point out how crazy this system is.
Okay, hold on.
Because
Okay. Wait. Here's okay. Listen. What you're saying, okay. This is what my issue is. I guess. Okay.
I think it's probably going to happen.
What?
I don't know if you disagree, but
My
do
big
you
issue is
disagree?
that the thing that I hate the most about like the disinformation environment that we live in, that people like Elon and Trump contribute to, but for some reason gets a pass by people because like you'll say, well, at least now we're talking about it, is that now we can't have real conversations about it. So let's say, for instance, okay, so one of the things when Trump went to get rid of DACA, that was a big moment for me where I was like, ooh, okay, well, It kind of feels bad, I guess, if
Did I give Musk a pass?
um when you say, well, at least now we're having the conversation, rather than saying this is a wholly illegal endeavor that he absolutely should not be embarking on, it feels like a pass, yeah. But
Okay.
when DACA gets when Trump attempts to cut away DACA, it makes me look at it and go, okay, we definitely need to have like a stronger immigration policy coming from Congress, because what can come from a president can be rescinded by a president. It's not good for major issues, right? I I could agree. The only reason I'm not agreeing is because I just don't know the particulars. But like, assuming everything you're saying is true, or let's say that the money's allocated and too generalized away from Congress, right? I could agree that okay, well maybe this isn't ideal, or this could be done better. If Trump would have said something like, "Today, my cabinet members, I went to Marco Rubio, and we saw that USAID gives all this money to all of these trans NGOs and blah 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 blah." Well, guess what? We looked at the appropriations from Congress, and it said that they wanted to do this for social development. So we're actually going to give all of this money now to Christian organizations. Well, if that was the case, now I'm sitting here thinking like, oof, well, we need to have these laws be made way more particularly from Congress. This is a legislation problem. Now, he didn't have to do anything illegal. He didn't do anything outside of the scope of his power. Arguably, he didn't even violate any norms. It's up to the departments to decide how they want to allocate contracts and money. Like, none of this needed TROs or Supreme Court insertions on fighting TROs. Have a world where we have a real conversation about a thing, and then we figure out how to deal with the thing, rather than some guy comes in with a nuclear bomb, and then when we're going through the rubble, go, oh, look, you see, the electricity was wired poorly in this house. You can tell by the way it fell over. Like, why not just have the actual conversation?
This is not an area where I think we're going to have like a ton of disagreement. I think that so when Ramaswamy left Doge, because I think I think it seemed like a really silly argument about a tweet, but whatever, he's gone. One of his pet project for Doge was, I thought, the thing that they were going to succeed on, which was in a post Chevron world, have an initiative where you get the heads of every agency to review their regulations and then say, in light of Loper and Chevron deference being gone, we believe the following regulations are unconstitutional and we rescind them. Just wipe them off the books. And then that would be very hard to rebuild, because you don't have Chevron deference if you try to rebuild the regulations in the next administration. So that would be a way to really trim down the scope of federal power and what agencies are regulating, that Doge could do, and could do, as you said, without stepping on like all these rakes where they're triggering TROs and all kinds of other problems. Now, the thing that Musk wants to do, if I'm being hyper charitable for a second.
Let's not.
Well, I think this is where the big joke is that most of our budget is not discretionary. So even if you trimmed like the whole budget,
it's like 1.7 trillion is the discretionary spending. Yeah,
it's just not possible to like run down licenses for Windows or like Microsoft products or whatever and balance the budget. That's not going to happen. But where there probably are hundreds of billions of dollars lying around, which would be insufficient to balance the budget, would still be a huge deal, is in real fraud and real misappropriation. But to do that, you need treasury records of payments, and you need DoD access.
Maybe.
Because that's where all the money is.
So here, this is the thing. Okay. So you said you've worked, you've done like legal stuff. I'm not going to say litigation because you could theoretically do other things besides litigation, right? But you've like had a job as a lawyer, right?
Yeah, I've been practicing since 2016.
Okay. Do you agree that I'm at least like decently smart, right?
Seem like a reasonably smart guy. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that I could audit your billable hours? Like, if I were to request from you all of the things that you're billing clients and you were to give me your sheets, do you think I could audit those reasonably?
You specifically?
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have some kind of background that would help you do that?
Okay.
I mean,
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that. Because I don't. I have no fucking idea, right? If you show me like call with client like 0.5 or whatever, And I'm like, really? Was it a 30-minute call? Do you bill for all of these? I don't know if I like this. And I just start like fucking with your timesheets. I imagine you're gonna look at me and you might say, if we're being nice, like, Steven, you're a smart guy and I appreciate that. But no offense, you have no fucking idea what any of the norms are here. You don't know what we should be billing for fucking anything.
Yeah.
If you want to audit my shit, maybe you should actually get with either people that work in law or audit law firms or something like that, because you just have no idea, right? That's how I feel when it comes to the Doge, Elon Musk auditing stuff. When you say pulling payments from the treasury, why the fuck would they have any?
$7 billion of fraudulent payments issued, and they recovered like 5 point something of that ultimately.
It was like 40 to 60% or something recover, something like that. Yeah, something like that.
But
but also just as a real quick thing on that, whether or not that's a good or bad amount of fraud, we have to know the percentage of the total expenditure, right? Because Social Security spends like $2 or $3 trillion or something. It's a
huge amount. Yeah,
sure.
So that doesn't mean that, like, I mean, it could be a very small amount of the pie, but at the same time, the odds that Social Security SSA caught all the fraud infinitely low, right? And they didn't do it ahead of time; they did it after the fact, which is why they had to try to recover it.
Yeah, of course, to some extent. Yeah.
You could create solutions that helped you identify potentially fraudulent payments earlier. That could be a thing that saves tens or more billions of dollars a year. That could be a big thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. Wait, just on Social Security. On Social Security. Okay, I love that point. Okay, and let's say that Elon Musk, because he has international clients or he does SpaceX, whatever bullshit. Let's say Elon Musk, okay, and this was even within, I would argue, maybe a little outside it, but almost within the USDS's original mission, the United States Digital Service under Obama that they try to say Doges or whatever, right? Yeah. Is if Elon would have gone to the SSA and said like, hey, first of all, can we request your thing? Because that's how we should do it. And then the SSA offers it, and they're like, for some types of fraudulent payments, this is something from private industry. We can identify these ahead of time because we have this system. And then the SSA is able to implement that. They run it recursively, they make sure it works, and they implement it. That would be awesome. What you're talking about there, that would be so cool. That would be like the best. That's like, in my mind, that is the United States of America at its best. It's taking capital enterprise.
We totally agree that we should be doing that.
That would be awesome. Okay. But what are we talking about right now? Do you know what the biggest talking point is about Social Security? You heard it? Or what do you think is like the big thing we're talking about right now for Social Security? It's all dead people. Because right now, Elon Musk and Trump are spreading this bullshit that Social Security is paying out like 13 million people who are all over the age of like 130. And that's the main talking point.
I'm sure that whatever he's saying is, I mean, didn't he at one point say that we cut like an $8 billion check and it was like actually 8 million?
Something, yeah. Like, there's been a couple things like that. But what I'm saying is, sure. But what I'm saying is, so what's happening? It goes back to my other point, and this is the thing I hate about disinformation is now we aren't having good conversations about Social Security. We aren't having good conversations about saving money. Now a lot of Americans just think, oh my God, 13 million people who are already dead are getting paid out by Social Security, which is just completely not true. So now we just don't even have any conversations about saving with Social Security. We're just focused on a problem that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, and I, if you're asking whether I want to defend Elon's statements on X, you're asking the wrong guy. That I'm certainly not going to do that. But I do think that's the kind of thing, and I think we both would want Doge doing. Like I think for example, as the DoD's famously failed, what is it, 7 audits in a row? Is it 8? I can't remember.
So the way that the DoD thing works is they wanted to implement a new way of auditing, and they started it I think 6 or 7 audits ago. The DoD is never expected to pass these audits until I think 2028 is the first time they're supposed to be able to pass it. But passing these audits doesn't mean that the money is just gone. It just means that they're like implementing new accounting procedures to find these.
They can't connect it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like and that's even tricky because like then what's the definition of like waste? Because what you're going to find in the DoD is almost like socialism for the military-industrial complex, right? Where it's like, people are like, man, we want to get some tanks. They're like, and the DoD's like, well, we're not really fighting a land war where we'd be using tanks. What we need is drones. And they're like, yeah, but they're built in my district, so you're getting a lot of money to build tanks. It's like, is that waste? Is that waste or fraud?
No,
probably not.
Not waste, fraud, or abuse.
It's certainly a problem.
Sure, it can be a problem, but that's a legislative problem, right?
It is. Yeah, and I don't think you could. Those certainly couldn't fix that. They could probably identify it. I think.
One of the things you're hitting on here that is so frustrating is that like these are problems that need to be fixed, and these band-aids, like, Doge can come in and fix the fact that people like to fight for pork in bills in Congress. Well, they can't fix that problem. That's a hard problem. If you really want to fix it, you have to really combat that.
It's just what drives me fucking crazy because it's like I would agree with you. Like it's like are Trump and Elon like the guys I would pick to do this? Like Hell no. Obviously no. But they seem to be the only game in town. Like I agree with everything you said about like we should be modernizing Social Security payments. We should be looking at how we're allocating military money so we're not spending money on stuff that the military itself doesn't even want. Like these are no brainers. So
when you say they're the only game in town, it's like saying like, I really wish that young girls would have better role models who would maybe like pay them for work and stuff in life. And Epstein was the only guy doing that for some of these girls. So like, was it perfect? Maybe not, but at least somebody was like looking into them. Like this is what this sounds like to me. And I can't understand this argument. It's just, they're not the only game in town. They're not doing things legally, probably. The charges they're bringing up are totally not like.
If let's say you care about something, right? We can pick whatever it is. In this case, it's the budget, it's deregulation, whatever. Care about it.
Yeah.
Your options are one party that, whatever their level of expertise, has no interest in the topic at all, and another party that's going to try, but you don't really think they're picking the best people.
And they're doing it illegally. It's not just the best people. They're not even really combating it, I don't think.
That's why I mean by the only game in town. Now, I didn't vote for them for reasons that we got into last time, so I don't need to bore you with it. But like, if the Democrats had a policy platform that actually was the sensible alternative to what's happening, I think they'd be in a much better place. And they should, because the stuff we're talking about, I think, is a universal area of agreement.
But
like,
the problem is,
80-20 issues.
I call these, I've heard these called like truisms. I don't know. This is my hot take, Republicans included. I don't think people actually do want a decrease in the size of the federal government. I think they want a number to go down, or they want to talk about bureaucratic bloat. But you talk to those same people. We want to cut the bureaucracy. All right, well, here's some cuts we've got lined up for the VA. No, not that. Okay, well, we got to look at Social Security or Medicare. No, not that. Okay, well, that's like fucking 3/4 of our budget. What about the military? No, America first. We need a strong military. Okay, well, that's our biggest line item on the discretionary spending. How about trans dances in Morocco? That one. Okay, well, that's $500,000. So like, at the end of the day, like, people have to be willing, and this is where like the brave leadership comes in. Like, who wants to come out and say, hey, we need to make these cuts? But instead, we've got a promise from Trump that waste, fraud, and abuse is going to get rid of like 50% of our spending, right? Ilana said 1 trillion, 2 trillion. And then on top of it, Trump is talking about extending the tax cuts, and we're tariffing everybody to decrease the size of our economy. Everything we're doing is heading to a huger deficit. The Republicans asked for a $4 trillion lift on the spending. So like, what's happening? What if they're not doing? They're not even doing the things we want them to do.
I was with Thomas Massey on that. I thought he was 100% right, which is like, if you're going to be serious about cutting the deficit, you can't vote to extend it the way that they did.
Yeah, or why not at the very least fully fund your IRS? Why are we cutting from the IRS?
I mean, I think the way Massey phrased it, which I thought was interesting, is he called it a tax holiday. Right? Because it was a temporary tax cut under Trump, which is very popular. This is the problem: is that like free money is always very popular.
Yes,
it's of course, right? So then voting against free money is very hard. But if you really want the federal government to be smaller, it needs to have less money and do less things, and that means you have to be willing, I think, as you just said articulately, like to bite the bullet and just say like, yeah, like, when we cut this area, it is going to create hardships for people, and we expect that the states are going to have to pick up the slack.
Sure.
Like they are going to, like
or that the benefits to your tax cuts or whatever are going to make this better. Like it's going to be, there might be some short-term pain, but we're going to go through some long-term stuff. And I would respect that. I'd be like, okay, at least we're having the conversation.
Well, and I think that's when America works the best. Also, by the way, is because like if you say, okay, the federal government's not doing X, Y, and Z thing, we're no longer helping you in this way. The states can. They're free to. And then you can decide. You're like, not everyone's fully mobile. I understand that. But like, you end up in a laboratory of democracy and you say, like, okay, in California, they have higher taxes, but they do provide this benefit. If you live in North Carolina, there's lower taxes and they don't. And then we can see how people vote with their feet and what works and who gets voted out of office and gets voted in. And I think we actually end up with better policy. And sometimes we end up with reasonable disagreement. And states are just different. And that's fine too. But you can't expect to cut the federal government and expect the federal government to be all things for all people. You just can't. It's insane.
Yeah, but we're not having that conversation. We're talking about insane shit. We're just talking about insane shit. That's the thing that I guess is the most.
So who on the left can be the standard bearer who shows up and it's like, no, here's a sane version of this. Because one of the benefits of having like two-party system historically was that they kept each other in check. Because if your shit got too crazy, people would just vote for the other guy, right? And one of the things that's happened is that the right has gone into a cult of personality mode, clearly. The other thing that's happened is that the left, for whatever reason, has embraced a bunch of 80-20 issues, where, like the women in sport, trans women in sports is an 80-20 issue. The issue with Israel wasn't quite 80-20, but it was bordering on it. There's common sense. It's better now, but like the version of DEI stuff that was happening during the BLM era, like there's
Sure, the left needs to do a better job of messaging. I don't disagree with you on that. But I don't like the idea that, like, if the left doesn't lose, my country is sliding into civil war.
So who's the person on the left who can articulate this sort of vision, where I think you and I agree on a bunch of stuff and can sell that to the American people in a way that sounds like the common sense it is?
I don't know. We've got 4 years to find out, I guess.
I just don't see the fucking person. And that's the problem. Like, I see Buttigieg and Newsom trying, but I don't think either of them can win. So I don't know who it is. Like, who has credibility, who can talk like a sane human and not be branded with, this sort of like.
Yeah, I agree. It's the thing they have to work on, I guess. But it also is frustrating to me that like the fact that we can talk about, conservative, like spending for the federal government or our debt, right? Why do conservatives get to act like they have the moral high ground on that when conservatives have increased the debt? Like, every time they've increased our budget deficit every single time they've come into office, after Democrats had to clean up the pieces from the last catastrophe that they've come into office on, right? Donald Trump increased his spending after he came in after Obama, and that was after Obama had to clean up from the 2007-2008 worldwide economic collapse. Biden had to come in cleaning up after the disaster that was fucking COVID. And now Trump is talking about extending tax cuts, contracting the economy through tariffs, and not making any real spending cuts. So it's is Trump going to have a bigger budget deficit than Biden did in his last few years? But somehow Republicans never get any accountability for any of this. How?
Well, this is why I got so frustrated with the Democrats during the last cycle. It's just like, yeah, I think this is like a layup. I think this is a layup for the Democratic Party. Trump's record on the deficit in his first term, and you can talk about COVID, which of course has a huge impact, but was not good. He has no track record of being a successful deficit hawk. So this should be an issue where the left could like easily win if they had a cognizant platform of how they were planning to attack the deficit.
Yeah, sure, but I guess the issue is that it's hard.
I don't understand why they don't.
Because it's hard. Because it's hard because at the end of the day, conservatives will just lie. A Democrat could come up and say, rightfully, "Listen, we can't afford these tax cuts. It's going to fuck our deficit over." But then the conservative will say, "We're going to do tax cuts and fix the deficit," which, by the way, is exactly what they're saying. That's a lie, but people vote for it. They like that. So what do? How do you counter that? Look at this chart. No one cares.
You have to actually have a message on the issue that resonates with people. And I think the problem with Harris ultimately was that just didn't believe her. They didn't find her authentic. They didn't believe that she had anything that was approaching a real principled approach that she was going to execute if she was put in office. And that's a shame, because you were running against Donald Trump, the threat to democracy, right? Like, this would be the time to put your best foot forward, and it was a disaster.
Yeah, I agree. They have messaging issues. I'm not disagreeing on that. I guess it's just part of it is the fact that conservatives have built this entire media apparatus from start to finish where they're willing to are you familiar with I don't know if we've talked about this before, but are you familiar with the Dominion case for Fox?
Yeah.
There's nothing that's equivalent to that on the left side. And what was the punishment for Fox for that? They paid out a huge settlement, sure, but they've just continued to grow in terms of market share as cable news network. I think Fox might be larger now.